Video Heaven was designed from the very beginning to be the definitive visual feast of the history of the video store.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the VHS Revolution show. I'm David Schumann. I have a great interview today with Alex Ross Perry. He's the director of Listen Up, Philip and Her Smell. He's also released 2 nonfiction films this year, Pavements, and the one we'll be talking about today, which is very close to my heart. It's called Video Heaven. It's all about VHS movies, video store culture. It's made up of just clips from other films and TV shows from the time depicting what life was like during that time and the culture of video stores and working in video stores and people who went to video stores. There's also some great archive commercials from the time for Blockbuster and news clips about video stores. It's just a wonderful piece of work. And I got to talk to Alex all about it. We had a great conversation. He told me all about the process of putting it together. So if you've seen the film and want to know more about it, check out the interview. There's not really much in the way of spoilers. So if you haven't seen the film, you could watch the interview anyway, and really nothing will be spoiled. You'll still enjoy the film. It's a great thrill to talk to Alex. So here's my conversation with Alex Ross Perry about his film, Video Heaven. My guest today is Alex Ross Perry. This is a really big deal for me. Alex, this film that you made, Video Heaven, is pretty amazing.
Thanks.
For people who are watching or listening, it's a almost 3-hour documentary. We'll kind of get into what it really is about video stores and about VHS and the culture of video stores and their unfortunate demise. And as people who watch and who follow me on Instagram know, I'm all about VHS.
I'm going to have to maximize so I can try to zoom in. I'm at least seeing what looks like a Tom Cruise section.
Yeah.
Starting, I see up Mission Impossible up through the client, and it looks like maybe the chamber.
Yep.
Maybe Runaway Jury. Maybe that goes into kind of a Grisham section as far as I
Yep,
can see.
It does. Yeah, we go from Cruise to Grisham. Yeah.
Not a logical thing other than the one overlap, but I appreciate
just that it works for my brain.
Yeah. I'll try to spot what else is back there during our time. I see Cape Fear over your shoulder. Wonder what else kind of lives near that.
Yeah, so that's like a Scorsese, De Niro, that then goes into like a Pacino.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there's some 2 tape Godfathers. Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, this is perfect. This is so great. I was just listening to you on The Big Picture yesterday, the interview you did about Pavements.
Yeah. A different movie
yes.
than this one in some ways, but both feature Beavis and Butthead.
That's the connective tissue.
Yeah, the pseudo nonfiction excavating the 90s era of cultural consumption Beavis and Butthead diptych that I made.
So this isn't really a documentary in the traditional sense. Was that intentional from the beginning?
Certainly. It's an essay film. And if people have seen one essay film, I would say they've probably seen Room 237 or Los Angeles Plays Itself. Those, I would say, are the 2 largest. If they've seen others, there's one that's like about the psycho shower scene. It's called like 7852 or something. There are films like this. This is an essay film. It was not meant to be a traditional documentary. A traditional documentary about a video store would probably feature footage of that store. It could feature interviews with video clerks. It could feature interviews with customers. There are dozens of documentaries like that. There's one about the store that I worked in. I'm in that documentary. I'm in some other documentaries about video stores. I participate in these films and I watch these films. I had no interest or understanding of making such a film. Video Heaven was designed from the very beginning to be an essay film, but not just an essay film. An essay film that is in some ways, hopefully, the definitive visual feast of the history of the video store as public space told through what we now have as the greatest, in some cases only, record of these places, which is their depictions in fictional stories.
Was the choice to do it as a visual essay, did that also mean, you don't have to get clearances for any of these clips? And did that just make putting it together easier?
That's correct. Well, certainly I wouldn't say it was easy. We started
More
this
free. Did it
project.
give you more freedom, I guess, is what I mean.
I suppose so. I don't know how you get clearances for other movies. I know that within the framework of an essay film, and I know this from the ones I just mentioned, Los Angeles Plays Itself chief among them, you can make a film out of 100 or so other movies, 150, 200 other movies. You don't have to license 200 films. You don't license any films. You live under the umbrella of fair use, of academic use, and you are unencumbered. I'm not saying that this is easy. It requires quite a bit of maneuvering, manipulating, legal discussions. It is not a shortcut, but it is a way to repurpose existing material into a meaningfully different piece of work. And that was the intention. If you were making just a random, this was the video store, and then you cut you a clip of one of our films, you might need to pay for it. If you're stringing 175 clips together and they are accompanied by 60 pages of academic text, writing, statistics, reading, analysis, you're on very stable ground to tell the story you want to tell using the material you have, but you don't have to break the bank.
This film combines two of my favorite things, video stores, obviously, and editing. So I'm an editor. I've been an editor for over 20 years. I edit movie trailers and have been worked in movie marketing. And not just the volume of footage, but the way that it's arranged is what just kept me wrapped throughout the entire film. So can you just speak to what the process was like for you in terms of putting it all together? Was it a really long process?
Well, yeah, as I said, we started this film in 2014. Late 2014 was when I first began discussing what would become this film with... There's two other key participants in this film, without whom it wouldn't exist. One is the film's editor, Clyde Foley. You've called out the amount of editing you see when you watch VideoHeaven, and if you're a layman, I don't know why a layman would be watching a 3-hour film about video stores, but if you're just looking for something watchable and entertaining that deals with pop analysis, you might just watch the film and say, this is a series of clips edited together. If you're an editor, you would look at this and perhaps, hopefully about every 2 to 3 minutes go, God, the amount of time it must have taken to get that edit just right. Because in our 170 minutes, between Maya's narration and the
Maya
performed, Maya Hawke's performance of our text, of our voiceover, and the nimbleness with which that is interwoven within our clips, in between our clips, instances where it's Maya, source audio dips out, Maya delivers another sentence or two, the sentence ends with something like, but, as you see here, and then we go back to our source audio, 500 such edits in 170 minutes. Clyde Foley and I spent, of these 10 years of the process, 5 of these years just sitting weekly, nitpicking every tiny edit, every connective moment within the clips. If you're cutting out material from a movie, but we're staying within the movie, we must nail that. If we're interweaving our narration, that must be precise. If we're going from clip to clip, you can't, normal editing things, you can't cut when someone's blinking, you can't cut when someone's about to speak. You're editing, and in some cases, the clip of a video store in a movie or a show has 2 seconds less footage than we need to make the edit perfect. The scene in the movie might be 36 seconds, but our voiceover with the scene, we need 42 seconds. And we were just banging our heads against the desk on that. He made this film what it is. He's a special features editor, trailers editor, an online editor for Criterion Channel, for Criterion physical releases. This is what he does. And the other partner on the film is the author of the book that inspired this film, Daniel Herbert. His book, Videoland, Movie Culture at the American Video Store. Highly recommended for any fans of physical media culture, video stores, videotapes. Dan, this is his graduate thesis. He's a professor of media studies. Dan wrote this wonderful book, which he aimed to be the first and definitive book about video stores, academically minded, the history of them, statistically speaking, what they meant in the American retail landscape, how they came to exist, what happened to them. I read this book in 2014 when it was published, wrote Dan a fan email and said, I'm a former video store clerk myself, filmmaker, not a documentary filmmaker, but if there's anything we could ever do, I would love to find some way to collaborate. And he said, I cut a chapter out of this book about the depictions of video stores on screen because my editor said it was unreadable. Not poorly written, but it doesn't read because you spend a third of every paragraph describing the scene. Will Smith walks into the store. There are mannequins everywhere. He walks past. He talks to this mannequin. That's not meant to be read. That's meant to be watched. And I said to Dan, send me that chapter. And it wasn't even finished. It had been abandoned prior to it being completed.
Yeah.
And I said, Dan, this is our seed. Let's plant this in the ground and see what happens. Through his research, he had cited in his chapter, which is only about 17, 18 pages, maybe 20 films. And he had found another 15 or 20. And we started talking. His research assistant found another 30 films. We put those on a hard drive. I had a copy. Dan had a copy. He works and lives in Ann Arbor, Michigan, the University of Michigan. We would get on the phone, say, let's press play on this clip. Let's talk through this clip. I'll just take dictation. Let's see what this clip means. What does this clip say? Is this clip about the clerks or is it about the customers? Right. When is this from? Obviously the 80s stuff. That goes into a different timeline of information. And we built it out from there. That was what we did basically 2015, 16, 17, and 18. Occasionally, sometimes I talked to Dan for 2 hours at a time. Sometimes we would just email. And we were building out our story. And we were compiling clips and sources the whole time. Once we got this into Clyde's hands in about 2019, he was able to then start chipping away at extremely shambolic timelines, where he recorded scratch track of our text, which was then rough. And he would just string things together, try stuff out. Maybe this goes here, maybe this goes here. We watch that version of the movie. We say, the spine is there, but there's nothing correct other than the spine. Let's really do this. Let's finish this movie. That was 5 years ago. And then we did. And things like the pandemic helped give more time to sit and focus on the project that wouldn't have been there otherwise. For me, the WGA strike helped because I was able to, for the first time in like 7 years, work on VideoHeaven like 4 days a week. And these things just kind of incrementally, one edit at a time. And there are thousands of them. We got there, then we recorded Maya's work, then we kind of edited the movie around the rhythms of her performance, which were obviously different than the scratch track. Clyde had done the scratch track. We had edited to that. We didn't make her match that. We just said, do what comes naturally, we'll fix it. If it's 5 seconds shorter, 5 seconds longer. That was another year and a half of Clyde and I finessing her work. We had her come back for a cleanup day. Some lines were shorter. Some things we had written a new sentence, a new paragraph for her where there once was nothing. Or we had consolidated 3 paragraphs into one for her. We did a cleanup day. We edited for another year, and then we finished the movie.
As I was watching, I was thinking, like, you don't just make a film like this by doing a Google search Like, what was the research like, and how did, because there's the obvious films, there's Clerks and there's Hamlet, but there's all these films that I had never heard of before. And how did you find that?
People say what you just said, and I always say two things. Which movies were you not familiar with? I'm always curious to hear people's lists because they're always different. Yeah. And I'll tell you where we found stuff, but you'll have to be specific because we've got 160 some odd movies. Every one of them I have a different answer for.
Wow.
There is no blanket answer other than the totemic ones, the ones that would come up if you Googled. Those were in Dan's original chapter. Those were in his research. And then his research assistant did find ones, some quite well known, others very, very unknown. Some of the 2000s ones, your Stan Helsings, things like that, she was able to find. I obviously was not familiar with those films. But there is no one answer. A lot of these probably, again, Clyde and I are film watchers and devout watching movies every day. You work on this for 10 years. Some of the stupidest selections in this, the answer is, I watched it. I wasn't watching movies saying I must find video stores. I must see video stores in the background. But some of the stupidest ones, how did you clock a video store in the background of Sister Act?
Right, or Ghost.
At some point between 2015 and 2024, I watched Ghost. I watched Sister Act. Ghost has been watched by tens of millions of people over the last 35 years. Not one of them has ever said, the thing about this film is that Patrick Swayze is killed in front of a video store.
Right.
But I said that when I finally watched Ghost for the first time in my life in 2020. And that became essential. There is nobody saying Ghost features a video store. There is now.
Yeah.
The answer is different, but I am curious which films jumped out at you.
Oh, I mean, I've seen The Naked Gun like 400 times, and never once did I ever see a video store in the background. So I guess, it's like when you're looking for it, it'll show up a lot, and it probably did show up.
It shows up, and you tell your friends you're doing this, and every once in a while your friend says, "I got one for you." But what you just said, you've seen it many times. You never notice the video store. I hope with this movie, its durational experience of watching it. You watch this movie after an hour. You're now watching every clip the way I watch everything, which is you cut in here and I see your frame. I'm immediately scanning every shelf for everything I recognize. And in every scene I've ever seen in a video store in a movie, which are all in Video Heaven, the characters are a blur to me. I'm looking at the shelves, the videos,
totally.
The sections, and my hope is that by giving people 3 hours to marinate in this world, after an hour, something our lawyer said at some point is, when we get to this clip, some clip an hour and a half into the movie, why don't you call out what's on the shelves the way you do earlier? Or why don't you call out that there are posters hanging up here of the film's distributor? And I said, because I need the viewer an hour and a half into this film to be making those connections for themselves.
Yeah.
Because if you are making those connections for yourself, I have now taught you how to watch this material the way I watch it, which is I would never miss a video store in the background of a film. I've seen some since we finished the movie, and it kills me, but it's okay that they're not in the movie, because that part's not meant to be exhaustive. It's meant to be suggestive of the fact that this was just consistent. But to me, that is where my eyes go. It is what my brain does, and these things just appeared to me. And a lot of the stupidest examples in this film, the answer is at some point I watched Sister Act. I was watching The Naked Gun. I was watching Lethal Weapon 3. And then some of the really bizarre examples, a friend of mine named Michael Ferrari, who was the head buyer at Kim's Video when I worked there and had worked previously at another location, a huge collector, thousands of Blu-rays. I sent him a cut of the movie 3 years ago. And we had, it was basically the movie. But then he wrote back with 30 films that nobody had mentioned, had never come up on research. And some of the most unhinged films that we have are from Michael's list. And it took me and Clyde 4 editing sessions to work through Michael's list, which was everything from a video store in the background of 7 Minutes in Heaven to Beethoven's Third to a TV remake of Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, Emo Phillips's Meet the Parents. Michael's list was stuff that was not on our radar, but he just had it and he fired it off immediately, and it plugged in 24 things that no one else was going to give us.
Yeah, I noticed as what you were saying, not only was I looking at the movies on the shelves, but I was judging, like, were they put in any order, or did some PA just like throw boxes on the shelves in the backgrounds of these video stores, you know?
This is the question always, and if you know about filmmaking, care about filmmaking, production design, etc., you ask these questions and you wonder, you see some films, Walking and Talking, that's obviously just a real video store. I have yet to find out what New York-based video store the Koholhoff Center shot that scene in. Everyone tells me a different answer of people who remember that era of New York video stores. It's obviously just a store. Now, it's a filmmaking decision to leave an entire rack of something weird VHS in the center of the frame for 20 seconds. She could have said, I don't want these movies in the frame, get these out of here and put something else there. But the filmmaker doesn't say that. So it becomes a document, a nonfiction snapshot of this store versus a gag in The Last Action Hero, where it's obviously this very fabricated store. And directly in front of Schwarzenegger is an entire shelf of John McTiernan films in suspense.
Right.
Is Medicine Man a suspense film? No, not really. But you look at this scene, and we don't even call this out because we just hope people notice. Schwarzenegger's leaning on the shelf, and it's Hunt for Red October, it's Die Hard, it's Medicine Man, and there's a little McTiernan section right there in his own movie. And then there's other stuff, like we have a clip of Saturday Night Live. Now you have to imagine, you make a Saturday Night Live episode in 1992. Jeff Goldblum's the host. You're doing a video store skit. You do not think 30 years from now, this is going to be in HD, downloaded, paused, and analyzed. So we can make a little section here that I think it says mystery, and it's Full Metal Jacket and Jungle Fever. Now this is irrelevant. They put up a sign that said mystery, they grabbed dozens of tapes, and they threw them every which way. Because the expectations are people are going to watch this weekend, and that's it forever.
Yeah.
So they don't care sometimes. And then other times you see a precision in the filmmaking of creating the exact right visual sense of what the store should be. Other times it just seems like they walked into a store and turned on the camera.
The scene from The Fisher King made me so angry for some reason. I think it's because you say in the film that Sony or Columbia put all of their boxes, their Red Stripe boxes, on the shelf. And of course I love the Red Stripe boxes. I have a bunch over here, Ghostbusters and Stripes.
Yeah, some of the best.
But seeing them all together just made no sense in terms of what a video store would be. And then also arranging the shelves with the empty boxes so that they could just fall over so easily. Yeah. I was like, come on, guys. That's not realistic.
It's quite bogus. Yeah, it's bogus the way they fall over. Now, obviously, there would be empty cardboard boxes on the shelf, but they wouldn't be upright. They would be stacked so dense that they're there. Yeah, it's a little bit silly, but it's, again, that's obviously production design. That's not clearly a real store. Or at least, maybe it's the bones of a real store that they came in and put all their own videos in. And you can even see a lot of the tapes, which is confusing to me in that moment. Do you know the phrase in production design, Greeking?
No.
Greeking is like when you make the signage or the label on a product or on a t-shirt look illegible.
Oh.
So it looks like some version between Roman letters and Cyrillic.
Okay.
To make it not say anything. Mm-hmm. And some of the movies, even though these are the films from Fisher King's own studio, some of the video boxes in that scene have been Greeked.
Oh, interesting.
to like
Funny.
disguise what they actually say. And I don't know why that would be. It's very strange. Some of them look very weird. It's a curious thing, but this is the fun of poring over every frame of nearly 200 clips, which again is me and Clyde editing this film for years and years, sitting there at his desk once a week, pausing, zooming in, hooting and hollering about some of the funny little things we're seeing in the background, saying, "Oh, I have that tape," or "Oh my God, like that, that thing is worth $200 now."
There's two important editorial decisions that I noticed that you do throughout the film. And I wanted to ask you what the kind of choices were behind those. So one was you start right from the beginning with Hamlet. You do it also with Body Double, where you show the scene, and then instead of cutting to something else, you then reverse that scene and then play it again or slow it down or freeze frame. And then the other thing is, speaking of the SNL sketch, where David Spade plays like 15 different video store clerks. And
it's just 3, but clearly it makes an outsized impression.
Well, then you also have Matthew Lillard and Josh Jackson,
yeah.
And a couple other people.
Well, Jack Black prominently.
Jack Black.
As a double, not a double clerk, but in 2 stores in 2 different films that came out just 2 years apart. The Holiday 2006, Be Kind Rewind 2008. The body double thing, that's what I was talking about earlier, where that scene is historically crucial. It is, as we say, the first time you see a video store in a Hollywood film. It says a lot about the era. The aesthetics of that store are crucial to the narrative we're telling. Its association with pornography is significant. It's 40 seconds long. We have 4 minutes to say about that. So you have to run it back. Now, fortunately, as we learned, to get your fair use certification, that sort of thing helps you a lot. If you just play the scene, that's fine if it's short and you're making a very clear point about it. Once you slow it down, reverse it, pause it, you are now altering the original in such a way that you are literally making a new piece of work out of something that already exists. And because you are altering it, you are now on stable footing, because you're not just saying, here's Body Double, this is the best scene in the movie, you don't need to rent it. You're saying, you're Zapruder filming it. You're saying, one more time, let's see that again, one more time, let's look at the aesthetics, look at the store. But again, that really just is an example of, I just wish that scene was 3 minutes long. Not because I want to live in that world, which I do, but because we have so much to say about it. The material simply does not give us enough time to cover all of the information we need to say about how crucial that moment is in Body Double. So we simply have to show it a second time. The repeating edits, you don't start a process with a hard drive saying, we're going to hit 3 David Spades in a row.
Right.
That just emerges after years and years.
It's part of the process, yeah.
Certainly. Now, of course, it's, on the one hand, irrelevant and stupid that David Spade appears in 3 separate films playing essentially the same character. Well, one of them's a Saturday Night Live skit, so of course he would be doing that at the time he was on the show. But it more just gets at the idea that I'm fascinated in of, when you ask him to do it the 3rd time, does he say, I've done this before? Or does it not matter? Does the actor not care? Matthew Lillard, he's in a store in Serial Mom. He's in a store in Scream. It's just funny. It's just interesting, but it gets at the idea that as time goes on with video store depictions, there's nothing new. There's not a lot of ground to break by the mid-90s because we're a decade into the idea of showing these spaces. And the point we wanted to make, finally in the film with the Jack Black duality of Be Kind Rewind the Holiday, is like, these movies used to just be quoting other movies. They used to go in and talk about the whole history of cinema. Now they're just talking about the same 10 things. Jack Black is referencing Driving Miss Daisy in 2 films, released 2 years apart. Dozens of films are referencing either Breakfast at Tiffany's or the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. One stands for horror, one stands for romance. That's it. No new ideas needed. There are thousands of horror films. We're just going to say Texas Chainsaw Massacre over and over. No new ideas needed. And our whole fascination is not, isn't that crazy, but what does this mean? Let's draw some of our own conclusions and let's let the viewer think about that.
So here's a crazy question. Were there any clips from any movies that didn't make it into the film?
Yeah, not many. And some of them were just things that it's just a handful, perhaps a dozen or so. Mm-hmm. I would say of that list, a lot of them are just further examples of recent-ish period pieces, and some TV shows. Let's just say movies or shows, because I don't really remember. Some of it was just like, we don't need a third sitcom. Do you remember video stores joke?
Right.
The one on the Goldbergs is precise because it talks about, hey, do you remember this? Late fees, this and that. And then it's Martin Starr, who is another one of our repeat offender clerks.
Yeah, I noticed that.
So some stuff like that is significant. Other recent, Always Sunny in Philadelphia is significant because they specifically say video stores are a dying market. This is one of the last ones. Some of the other examples just didn't really register or mean anything. The thing we cut a lot of were commercials. The movie 170 minutes, there was a cut of the movie that was about 190 minutes where we trimmed a lot of clips down, cutting them in half in some cases. But we also cut out a dozen commercials, some of which we played almost in their entirety, 30 seconds. And that repetition was ultimately not interesting to us because every single commercial has the same tonality, which is, this is a good thing, come check it out. There's all variations on that, but commercials don't support the narrative of these spaces. They sell the fantasy of these spaces. And as the edit went on, just more and more commercials became quite useless to the story we were telling.
There's one clip from a movie that I thought, at first I thought, oh, for sure they're going to include this. But then as the film went on, I was like, okay, it doesn't really fit, which is the scene from City Slickers when Billy Crystal is telling Daniel Stern about programming the VCR. That's like tangentially related, but not really related to video stores. But it's more like from that time with VCRs and everything.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that. There's other things like that. I mean, we have a few clips in the movie where somebody mentions a store but doesn't go to one. Ben Affleck, Gwyneth Paltrow, Bounce.
Oh yeah.
I stand in front of the video store for aisles. I never know what to rent. Right. But the programming the VCR, some stuff like that is just neither here nor there. The thing we really did cut, and we didn't cut it from the movie, we cut it from the research, was stores that are just pornographic stores, which originally was something we wanted to include in the pornography chapter. And eventually we just realized this is so not the narrative we're telling. 8mm, Blast from the Past, more recently, Maxine, stores that are pornography stores that are renting movies. Not one of these clips literally fit the narrative we were telling at any given moment. And eventually we had maybe 10 of these. Going to buy pornography, you see this in period pieces like The Deuce. It just went away. We just had no space for that little side story.
Yeah. Let's step away from the film for a second and talk about your personal experience with video stores, working in a video store. I worked in a video store. One of my favorite things to do when I was a kid was ride my bike down to the main street. I grew up in Vancouver, Canada. I rode my bike to Dunbar. I would go and get some candy, and then I would go to the video store, Video Plus, and I would just walk around and look at the boxes and read about these movies that I had never heard of, and then I would talk with the owner, and then a few years later, I ended up working there. That was like kind of a more like middle of the road video store, but it of course didn't last. And now I was just there this weekend. I drove by. That whole block has been rebuilt with like a condo. So the building isn't even there anymore. So that's just a little story. But what was your experience of working in a video store?
Yeah, Suncoast Video was my first job. I worked at the Suncoast Video at the King of Prussia Mall in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania. A store that I loved, buying, Suncoast, no rentals, just sales. And one of many stores that I loved frequenting when I was at the mall. I had wanted to work in a video store at a young age. And for me, that would have been one of the many blockbusters in and around town. The TLA Video in Bryn Mawr, or the Suncoast at the mall. And I think, as I recall, both Blockbuster and TLA said you have to be 16 to work here. And Suncoast says you have to be 15. So when I turned 15, I got a job there. I turned 15 in July. I remember I was working there by September. And I worked there that whole school year, really. And it was very fun. Because it was in the mall, you were very limited in what you were able to play on the TV. But it was the classics. You could throw on Ghostbusters, Star Wars, things like that. Things that anybody could walk in and enjoy seeing a moment of. They're not going to scandalize customers. And I had a great time there. And it was a hugely significant time, I think, in the history of home media, because this would have been August onward of the year 2000. And I remember Black Friday, busiest shopping day of the year. Two massive hits of the summer 2000, X-Men and Gladiator, come out on DVD. And this is the beginning of the wait to own the movie doesn't exist anymore, right? You and I remember in 1997, a summer blockbuster comes out for rental some months later, and then months later, you can get it for sale.
Yeah.
Right? If I had to guess, I would say something like a Jurassic Park, released in June, could be available for rent as soon as September. Maybe it's available to buy for Christmas. But there was always that little delay between price to own and price to rent. Of course, when videotapes cost $100.
Right.
Geared towards the industry of a video store can afford to buy a $100 tape because they're going to rent it for $4 1,000 times. But I remember working when X-Men and Gladiator came out straight to DVD. Their first release, of course, it's 2000, so they were on video as well. But I remember watching these two DVDs just fly off the shelves on Black Friday and thinking, this is a paradigm shift. This is not the way this industry used to be. This is not the way this industry was when I started working here 3 months ago. The 99-2000 transition into DVD, along with that kind of film, big blockbusters being released, beautiful packaging, second disc with special features. I just remember at Suncoast thinking, I'm watching something significant happen here. So I worked there for a while, went to college later, and then worked at Kim's Video on St. Mark's Place in Manhattan for 3 years, all of my junior, senior year. And then after I graduated from NYU, I was ultimately the manager of the DVD sales floor. And it was a seminal experience and a wonderful job. And then that job continues to this day in a way, because the rental collection from that store, about 50,000 tapes and DVDs, primarily favoring tapes, was acquired by the Alamo Draft House in Lower Manhattan. And Sean Williams and I, who I worked with, who shot many of my films, we have been re-archiving the rarest of the rare. And we now have out on the floor at the Alamo about 4,000 videotapes, almost all of which we can guarantee no American DVD, no American Blu-ray, no streaming. Kim's was known for having movies you could not find anywhere else. And we have found there are still 4,000 to 5,000, 6,000 tapes from that collection that you cannot find anywhere else. And we have made them available to movie renters of New York once again. So in a way, I continue to be a video clerk, even though this is now an unpaid volunteer position instead of my measly minimum wage livelihood.
Could you relate to the type of video store clerk that was often portrayed in movies and shows? Did you have a little bit of a stuck-up attitude, or were you, like, what kind of store clerk were you?
Well, people ask this a lot, and maybe you have a different answer. You were a clerk, like, you've now seen the film with dozens of examples. Like, what gets closest to the truth for you? Because I think this is a very peculiar thing, which is that clerks who lived the life, you watch a 2-minute scene, or in the case of Video Heaven, 100 2-minute scenes. You don't see a lot of truth. You see a lot of comedic exaggeration.
Yes.
If there's a truth in this, for me, it's somewhere between Kevin Corrigan in Walking and Talking, just kind of a scruffy doofus hanging out, talking about something weird horror movies, who uses the video store as an opportunity to meet women. Yes, there's a lot of truth in that for me. Jamie Kennedy in Scream, of course, the template for a lot of people my age.
Yeah.
Just like, man, this would be the coolest. Be a guy like that who's just funny and knows so much about movies. But by and large, the point, and of course the point of our movie and what we show is like, these clerks are in almost all instances depicted as cartoonish morons.
Yes.
Which is not how I see myself. And it's,
Right.
you know, I often say that the most honest video clerk movie would be like a John Dielman. In 8 hours of working your shift, 5 days a week, not a lot of interesting stuff happens.
Right.
I opened the store a lot. So my shift started at 9:30, store opened at 10. The second employee would show up at noon. Between 10 and noon, I might have 3 customers. So I would just watch a movie every day from 10 to 11:30 or 10 to noon. That is not dramatically interesting.
Right.
But I did that every single day.
Yeah.
There's no reason to render that 2.5 hours on screen. But if you did, it would look like a European art film.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember being more, you know, getting into it more with other clerks at the store rather than the customers. 'Cause, you know, I'm a clerk. I'm representing the store. I felt like I had some responsibility to be. I lived in like a family neighborhood, so I had a responsibility to be professional. But occasionally, you would get people coming in who were like wanted to just talk about movies, and I had friends who just liked to talk about movies, and so that was fun. But your Eddie K. Thomas in Felicity, like, or your Martin Starr, who's just like super, you know, whatever, holier than thou or above it all is that wasn't really my experience. You know, when I go into Cinephile, they're movie nerds, but they're friendly.
Yeah, no, we had a bit of that. But as you see with Randall and Clerks, hostility happens. It doesn't happen because you want it, but this is one of my great fascinations. We have in our film, I don't know, 30 examples of a clerk exploding at a customer for one reason or another. Is there a single scene in film history of a librarian screaming at someone returning a book and arguing that the pages were torn out, arguing that the ending of the book sucked,
Right.
and you recommended a bad book to me? No. Is there a single example of someone going into a record store and saying, this album sucked, I cannot believe you recommended this? And the guy's, maybe High Fidelity.
Maybe High Fidelity. Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
That's the one.
Yeah.
But there's one.
With Jack Black.
There's 90 video store films where that happens.
Yeah.
And that is just fascinating to me. These are all forms of consuming art, media, filmmaking, storytelling, music, fiction, history. But only the video store takes on this outsized role of fictional space. What's the Seinfeld bit with the bookstore? George takes a book into the bathroom and they don't let him return it. What's the Seinfeld bit about the video store? Well, we have 5 of them. Awkwardness, frustration, humiliating experience, arguing about a late fee, arguing about rewinding. The bookstore thing is this bizarre bathroom humor. The video store in Seinfeld takes on so many different storytelling possibilities, all of them negative, all of them humorous. Only the video store possesses that much dramatic possibility, and that to me is very special.
Was there anything that you learned that you didn't know about video stores or about movies in the process of making this?
I learned so much. Dan's book taught me, there's so many things in Dan's book that were revelations to me. The statistics, a huge thing that people our age and certainly people younger than us struggle to understand. And we say this in the film a few times. You and I might think the peak of video store is like 1995 where there's blockbusters everywhere. But actually the peak of video stores with the most of them is like 1990. By the mid 90s, they had started to decline.
Oh.
That I didn't know. I never knew that. Dan elucidates that point with statistics that are very fascinating because in the 80s, the proliferation of them, as we showed, they could be anywhere.
Yes.
They could have 1,000 tapes. They could have 2,000 tapes.
I loved that. How you would show them in convenience stores and grocery stores. That really reminded me of that particular time.
Once Blockbuster takes over, there's a lot of Blockbusters, but there's less Blockbusters than there are gas stations and grocery stores. Mm-hmm. And I just loved learning the flow chart of the early 80s to the 2000s of when video stores actually were at their peak. I loved learning from Dan's book, and we call this out in the film, how close together these spaces often were, a mile or two apart, which of course you and I might remember. You see this in Clerk, so that we don't show it in the film. Randall wants to go to the other video store to rent a movie his store doesn't have. I loved learning the depth of the actual factual history of these spaces in American retail, which Dan's book taught us, which we put for our film right in the opening. So you learn that within the first 15 minutes. Then Clyde, who brilliantly is editing this film, Clyde worked at Troma, and Clyde's opening up that can of worms and giving us the Troma tangent, which becomes kind of the heart of our story, which is this independent company with independent ethos who time and time again is represented in the video store, on the shelves, on the walls, as a means of quickly and easily conveying this place is esoteric and weird, was a brilliant thing that only Clyde could have done. Dan, in his book, Dan didn't know anything about Troma. Dan's whole chapter has no Last Temptation of Toxie. That's Clyde saying, like, we knew that had a video store scene, but Dan didn't zero in on it. And for us, that film being released in November 89 is such a crucial end of that decade where Troma then continues to exist, still does to this day. But its use on things like Dawson's Creek, Men in Black 2, nobody's watching Dawson's Creek and saying, I should check out Femme Fontaine, Killer Babe for the CIA. But that poster is just there to suggest to people, video stores have all sorts of wacky crap.
I had kind of a love-hate relationship with the bigger stores, the Hollywood Videos and Blockbusters, because yes, they had things available that, say, the smaller stores didn't, because the smaller stores only had 1 or 2 copies of something. And I loved going and checking out their previously viewed tapes section. I mean, I think my VHS of The Firm or In the Line of Fire is still the same VHS that I bought in 1994 from the previously viewed section of Blockbuster. But anytime I see those clips in your film, they're just like you say, like they're brightly lit, like they're just like kind of boring. And even those commercials where everybody's just smiling, it just like doesn't feel like real video store culture.
I went to Blockbusters a lot. The sort of the other chains, I didn't go to so much because by the time those were kind of around, I had mostly migrated my taste to TLA, which was an independent store that organized things by genre and director. So I had kind of left Blockbuster behind by that time and was making my way through the Cronenberg section, through the Verhoeven section, and going and learning about movies in a different way. But it's all part of it. There is no wrong answer. But as we like to point out in the film, it's all one thing now. Not these things drove each other out of business. It's not like
right.
Barnes and Noble, I think last year opened something like 200 new stores.
Wow, really?
And there is also, this was a huge news story.
Oh.
I think it was 2024. They had their biggest expansion in like 20 years. Now imagine if it was like Blockbuster's opening 60 new stores in 2025. That'd be crazy. There's Barnes and Nobles everywhere. There's also independent bookstores everywhere. Video stores drove each other out of business. Part of the thesis of the movie that I did arrive at. You asked, did I learn anything? I didn't learn anything, but I came to think, as someone who is searching for an explanation as to what happened to my beloved spaces. Watching these hundreds of clips over and over again, 6 years ago, I just had this thought. These scenes are why these stores don't exist anymore. Not entirely. Obviously, video stores as an industry were decimated by, you can't say the reality of retail because retail still exists. Bookstores are everywhere, etc. They were decimated by changing technology. But again, music had MP3s. Music had Napster. Music has streaming. There's a music store 2 blocks from my house in a small town. 1 town over where my daughter goes to school, there's another music store. Music didn't go away. There's a bookstore here, there's a bookstore in the other town. You can get an ebook, but there's also a bookstore everywhere. Yes, video had streaming. Video had movies on demand. Video had all these other factors. But it also had one thing that no other retail industry had, which is incessant messaging. Everywhere you looked, that these are negative, stressful, frustrating, humiliating spaces. So I don't say video stores don't exist anymore because Frasier made a joke about them.
Right.
But I do say part of why video stores don't exist anymore is because between Frasier, Seinfeld, Friends, Mad About You, that's 100 million viewers.
Yeah.
Between the most popular shows on TV, all being shown the video store as a space perhaps best avoided. Right. I'm not saying that was telling people to go away. I do believe all of these depictions were all in good fun. Mm-hmm. But after you get to triple-digit depictions of them, 100 clips of video stores as being
it's subliminal
places to go. It's subliminal, and that subliminal messaging hit right at a time. You could get a DVD mailed to your mailbox, or you could watch a movie at home, and it's just this perfect storm of, it's like when a bank collapses. A bank doesn't collapse because they made loans. A bank collapsed because they made too many loans to the wrong people at the wrong time. And that's what happened in this industry, I feel. And that was something I didn't start off this project knowing. That is not Dan Herbert's thesis of his book. He doesn't disagree with my thesis, but he says that is your conclusion of my book plus these 200 clips you have. And I say, that's my conclusion. Someone else could look at all these and draw a different conclusion. Yeah. That's just the way it is.
I was listening to your podcast interview about pavements on the Big Picture, which is my favorite podcast. I love those guys. I love listening to those guys. Sean and Amanda and Chris, they're just incredible. And
I will pass that praise along.
Oh, my favorite. You were talking about almost at the end of the conversation about like kind of the state of the industry, and you were talking about how it's a very rough time for creativity. Do you think that the time of the peak time of the video store, like you said, there's 4,000 tapes at Kim's that have never been released anywhere else. Do you feel like that time was maybe the peak time for creativity because people could make these cheapo horror movies or sci-fi movies or action movies and know that they would be seen on VHS?
I think that still exists. That's the kind of thing that people like you or me, we know that that's evolved. We don't say cheapo horror and cheapo action don't exist anymore because the video market doesn't exist. We know that has migrated. Mm-hmm. There's low budget horror being released directly to streaming, distributed by the filmmakers. What we used to call red box action films back when Redbox, as we call it in the film, was a way to rent movies through basically an ATM with these, sort of stars of action. These movies exist everywhere. The difference is the ubiquity of them, which is that back when straight to video, which used to really mean something, like that was a kind of movie, a direct to video movie, they would be at a Blockbuster most likely. There'd be maybe 2 copies to the theatrical Blockbuster's 100, but they would be there. And then over time, there would just be one of each on the shelf. Now, everything is so split up, fans have to know where to look. I just learned that there's an entire streaming service called Found, which is just a found footage streaming service.
Oh, wow.
Which has an entire ecosystem of filmmakers who are known in that world, which in every way resembles the world of shot-on-video horror of specifically the 90s, which started in the late 80s. But there's more shot-on-video horror than anyone could ever imagine. Trying to look, I have a book somewhere over here, the Bleeding Skull book I have. This whole book of hundreds of shot-on-video horror films that by and large, nobody, in quotes, has ever heard of.
Right.
These are not even mainstream adjacent. And there's so much of that. There always has been. It's always just kind of been off to the side, and it still is. But what doesn't exist is the idea that if you make a movie for X amount of money and you know that you can sell at the least one copy to half of the video stores in the country, you'll make profit. That used to just be a mathematical guarantee. Nothing like that exists anymore and ever will again.
At the end of the film, you play an extended clip of I Am Legend. What was it about that film that had you decide to essentially end your film with it?
In Dan Herbert's uncompleted chapter, he starts his chapter with I Am Legend and ends it with Hamlet. I didn't remember this until we were at the premiere at Rotterdam, and he said, actually, you flipped those. And I thought, I have no recollection of doing that at all. But I Am Legend became crucial, not just because of Dan's highlighting of it, but because he said this in his text. So I have to give him credit for isolating what is significant about I Am Legend. Simply put, it is a zombie film that brings the space of the video store back to life by being a 2007 released future dystopia that posits in this fictional reality that if the world ends today, video stores will always exist. What I brought to this is that Tower Video location was 2 blocks from Kim's where I worked. It was 2 blocks from the dorm I lived at NYU, and I walked by it every day for years. So I was able to say to Dan, I'll do you one better. They shot this in 2006. When this movie came out in 2007, the store was gone. And only someone who lived in the neighborhood would know that. People would remember Tower Video closed because it's not there anymore. But the exact timeline of going to see that film when it came out and saying, hey, it's Tower, back from the dead, was an embellishment and an actualization of the point Dan had already been making, which is that, as we say in the film, I Am Legend takes a moment in time and freezes it. And then my line that I wrote is that it imagines a world where video stores would exist in the future, but now they exist only in the past. Now, literally the past of our lives, but also, if the world ended at some point prior to, let's say, 2010, there'd be video stores all over. But that's not what happened. I Am Legend just spoke to the entire project of understanding what these spaces were. And of course, Dan's point that we make in the film is that the scene is about the video store as a space of recreating sociality, right? He could do what you have behind you. Will Smith could take every single video home from Tower so that he does not have to risk going out into the zombie infected world in order to get a movie. But he doesn't do that. What he does is he sets up all the mannequins so that he can not just get a video, but represent the social experience of going to a store, browsing, talking with clerks, talking with customers. And that is what the video store was. The video store was, on the one hand, yes, a repository for accessing movies. But you can still access movies. You can access movies right now on Amazon, iTunes, whatever. But the video store mostly was a place for achieving a social experience. And that is gone. Now that exists in the lobby of a movie theater. It exists, on Letterboxd or whatever, but that's not the same thing. As a physical space, those social experiences are very rare now, whereas they used to be ubiquitous. And I Am Legend just, was just a fastball coming right down the plate of like, this is your ending.
It's a great way to end the film, and it's a really incredible achievement. So How do people see it? Just at film festivals?
It's a great question. So Video Heaven will be enjoying hopefully a very long sort of piecemeal theatrical release, depending on where you live. VideoHeaven.movie is where we will be updating screenings. I will post about all of them on Instagram, which is just my name, Alex Ross Perry. We have screenings lined up for the rest of the year. If people have a art house near them, a micro cinema, a video store, a college, whatever, we'll book the movie anywhere. There's information on the website to book it. You just click on it. We'll bring it anywhere. It's released by a nonprofit. We're very flexible about where and how we'll screen it. It does not need to run for a week. It can play one screening. And then next spring or so, it'll be on streaming. But we want it to have a nice year or so to just kind of kick around limited pop-up screenings. And then, of course, before it comes on streaming, there'll be a 2-tape video of it for sure.
I should definitely get that.
So all we can say is if you are interested in it, if it sounds like your kind of movie, it probably is. Keep your eyes peeled. We will do our best to get it anywhere that as few as 10 people in a room would like to congregate, watch it, and have a nice little conversation about it.
Well, Alex Ross Perry, thank you so much for appearing here, accepting my invitation, having this conversation with me. It's been so awesome talking to you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, man.
Thanks, man. Okay. That was my conversation with Alex Ross Perry about his film Video Heaven. Alex, thank you so much again for coming on the show. Just a great thrill to talk to you, and just a fascinating film, just an amazing piece of work. You know, it's not a film that's going to be easily available. You have to really seek it out. So go to the website, check out when the screenings are, go see the film with an audience, and really, he's going to be at a lot of the screenings answering questions about it. Maybe some of the questions got answered today in our interview, and maybe there's some other ones that I didn't ask, but I think it's really worthwhile to see the film. I would love to see it in a theater with an audience. I have more great interviews and episodes coming up, so if you enjoyed this video, please give the like button, subscribe to the channel. That's all for now. See you next time.